This is an NBC News special report. President Biden addresses the nation. Here are Lester Holt and Savannah Guthrie.
Good evening. We're coming on the air to bring you a historic moment for the country. President Biden, moments away from addressing the nation about why he dropped out of the presidential race.
This will be the first time we've heard directly from the president since he made that announcement on Sunday that he was ending his bid for a second term and instead endorsing his vice president, Kamala Harris.
His decision as he was recovering from COVID was a political earthquake. It's been more than half a century since a sitting president decided not to pursue their final term, and never in modern times has it happened this close to an election.
Well, the president is expected to frame his exit from the race as the passing of the torch to the next generation and in service of defending democracy. His decision came after weeks of growing pressure from within his own party to step aside amid concerns that his age and poor debate performance made it nearly impossible for him to beat former President Trump in November.
The president will be speaking from the Oval Office tonight, only his fourth address from there as president, the venue usually reserved for moments of national crisis or major policy proposals. This address will be uniquely personal, however.
Yeah, so the president has 6 more months in office. Tonight will likely begin his efforts to shape his legacy. So let's take you to the West Wing of the White House, the Oval Office, and here's President Biden.
My fellow Americans, I'm speaking to you tonight from behind the resolute desk in the Oval Office. In this sacred space, I'm surrounded by portraits of extraordinary American presidents. Thomas Jefferson wrote the immortal words that guide this nation. George Washington, who showed us presidents are not kings. Abraham Lincoln, who implored us to reject malice. Franklin Roosevelt, who inspired us to reject fear. I revere this office, but I love my country more. It's been the honor of my life to serve as your president. But in the defense of democracy, which is at stake, I think it's more important than any title. I draw strength and I find joy in working for the American people. But this sacred task of perfecting our union is not about me. It's about you, your families, your futures. It's about we, the people. And we can never forget that. And I never have. I've made it clear that I believe America is at an inflection point. One of those rare moments in history when the decisions we make now will determine our fate of our nation and the world for decades to come. America's going to have to choose between moving forward or backward, between hope and hate, between unity and division. We have to decide, do we still believe in honesty, decency, respect, freedom, justice, and democracy? In this moment, we can see those we disagree with not as enemies, but as fellow Americans. Can we do that? Does character in public life still matter? I believe I know the answer to these questions because I know you, the American people, and I know this. We are a great nation because we are good people. When you elected me to this office, I promised to always level with you, to tell you the truth. And the truth, the sacred cause of this country is larger than any one of us. And those of us who cherish that cause, cherish it so much, a cause of American democracy itself, must unite to protect it. You know, in recent weeks, it's become clear to me that I need to unite my party in this critical endeavor. I believe my record as president, my leadership in the world, my vision for America's future, all merited a second term. But nothing can come in the way of saving our democracy. That includes personal ambition. So I've decided the best way forward is to pass the torch to a new generation. That's the best way to unite our nation. You know, there is a time and a place for long years of experience in public life. But there's also a time and a place for new voices, fresh voices, yes, younger voices. And that time and place is now. Over the next 6 months, I'll be focused on doing my job as president. That means I'll continue to lower costs for hardworking families, grow our economy. I'll keep defending our personal freedoms and our civil rights, from the right to vote to the right to choose. I'll keep calling out hate and extremism. Make it clear there is no place in America for political violence or any violence ever, period. I'm going to keep speaking out to protect our kids from gun violence, our planet from climate crisis that is the existential threat. And I will keep fighting for my cancer moonshot so we can end cancer as we know it, because we can do it. And I'm going to call for Supreme Court reform because this is critical to our democracy, Supreme Court reform. You know, I will keep working to ensure America remains strong and secure and the leader of the free world. I'm the first president in this century to report to the American people that the United States is not at war anywhere in the world. We'll keep rallying a coalition of proud nations to stop Putin from taking over Ukraine and doing more damage. We'll keep NATO stronger, and I'll make it more powerful and more united than any time in all of our history. I'll keep doing the same for our allies in the Pacific. You know, when I came to office, the conventional wisdom was that China would inevitably surpass the United States. That's not the case anymore. And I'm going to keep working to end the war in Gaza, bring home all the hostages, and bring peace and security to the Middle East and end this war. We're also working around the clock to bring home Americans being unjustly detained all around the world. You know, we've come so far since my inauguration. On that day, I told you, as I stood in we stood in a winter of peril and a winter of possibilities. Peril and possibilities. We were in the grip of the worst pandemic in a century, the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression, the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War. But we came together as Americans, and we got through it. We emerged stronger, more prosperous, and more secure. Today, we have the strongest economy in the world, creating nearly 16 million new jobs, a record. Wages are up. Inflation continues to come down. The racial wealth gap is the lowest it's been in 20 years. We're literally rebuilding our entire nation, urban, suburban, rural, and tribal communities. Manufacturing has come back to America. We're leading the world again in chips and science and innovation. We finally beat Big Pharma after all these years to lower the cost of prescription drugs for seniors. And I'm going to keep fighting to make sure we lower the cost for everyone, not just seniors. More people have health care today in America than ever before. And I signed one of the most significant laws helping millions of veterans and their families who are exposed to toxic materials. You know, the most significant climate law ever in the history of the world. The first major gun safety law in 30 years. And today, the violent crime rate is at a 50-year low. We're also securing our border. Border crossings are lower today than when the previous administration left office. I've kept my commitment to appoint the first black woman to the Supreme Court of the United States of America. I also kept my commitment to have an administration that looks like America and be a president for all Americans. That's what I've done. I ran for president 4 years ago because I believed and still do that the soul of America was at stake. The very nature of who we are was at stake. And that's still the case. America's an idea. An idea stronger than any army, bigger than any ocean, more powerful than any dictator or tyrant. It's the most powerful idea in the history of the world. That idea is that we hold these truths to be self-evident. We're all created equal, endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights: life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. We've never fully lived up to it, to this sacred idea, but we've never walked away from it either. And I do not believe the American people will walk away from it now. In just a few months, The American people will choose the course of America's future. I made my choice. I've made my views known. I would like to thank our great Vice President Kamala Harris. She's experienced, she's tough, she's capable. She's been an incredible partner to me and a leader for our country. Now the choice is up to you, the American people. When you make that choice, remember the words of Benjamin Franklin that's hanging on my wall here in the Oval Office, alongside the busts of Dr. King and Rosa Parks and Cesar Chavez. When Ben Franklin was asked, as he emerged from the convention going on, whether the founders had given America a monarchy or republic, Franklin's response was, a republic, if you can keep it. A republic, if you can keep it. Whether we keep our republic is now in your hands. My fellow Americans, it's been the privilege of my life to serve this nation for over 50 years. Nowhere else on earth could a kid with a stutter from modest beginnings in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and Claremont, Delaware, one day sit behind the resolute desk in the Oval Office as President of the United States. But here I am. That's what's so special about America. We're a nation of promise and possibilities, of dreamers and doers, of ordinary Americans doing extraordinary things. I've given my heart and my soul to our nation, like so many others. I've been blessed a million times in return with the love and support of the American people. I hope you have some idea how grateful I am to all of you. The great thing about America is here, kings and dictators do not rule, the people do. History is in your hands. The power is in your hands. The idea of America lies in your hands. We just have to keep faith, keep the faith, and remember who we are. We're the United States of America, and there's simply nothing beyond our capacity when we do it together. So let's act together, preserve our democracy. God bless you all, and may God protect our troops. Thank you.
The 46th President of the United States speaking from the Oval Office and framing this in the starkest imaginable terms, saying it is democracy on the line. He said, I revere this office, but I love my country more. And he talked, Lester, about the need to unite his party. He argued that his record merited a second term, but it was clear to him that it was time to pass the torch, in his words.
Let's bring in our NBC News team covering all things politics. Kristen Welker, moderator of Meet the Press. Hallie Jackson is our senior Washington correspondent, and Peter Alexander, chief White House correspondent. Kristen, let me begin with you. The president, by all accounts, resisted coming off the ticket for days as people lined up to show him polling data. Tonight, did he seem like a man who was all in on this concept?
He did, Lester, and just taking a step back, this was a speech for the history books, just as when LBJ announced he wasn't going to run for re-election in 1968, and we have seen those clips played and replayed throughout time. This is the type of speech that will be replayed for decades to come. Lester, you're absolutely right. It is clear that President Biden wanted to convey that he had come to terms with the reality of the situation. And I'll just read that soundbite, Savannah, that you referenced, because it was a powerful one. He says, I believe my record as president, my leadership in the world, my vision for America's future, all merit a second term, but nothing can come in the way of saving our democracy. That includes personal ambition. So I've decided the best way forward is to pass the torch to a new generation. Stunning to hear him talk about personal ambition and to acknowledge that he clearly wrestled with this decision. This also, I think, can be viewed as what he would like to be the first draft of how his legacy is remembered. Right off the bat, you heard him talk about past presidents who he reveres, from Lincoln, Jefferson, Roosevelt. He also talked about the things he says he will continue to fight for: reproductive rights, voting rights. He says there will be reforms, or at least he will call for that on the Supreme Court. And he really ended this, Lester and Savannah, with a call to action, saying history is in your hands. So it is clear he was delivering this speech for the history books with the knowledge that, again, these words will be played and replayed throughout time, Lester and Savannah.
Kristen, yeah, we want to turn to Hallie and bring her into this conversation as well. It wasn't a campaign speech, but he certainly put the choice in very dramatic terms, asking the question of the American people, does character still matter? Does freedom, does justice still matter?
You took the words right out of my mouth, Savannah, because that's what jumped out to me, too, that even at this moment, President Biden is still casting this decision come November in the same terms that he did when it was him that was going to be up against former President Trump. This idea of character, who has it and who has the fortitude to lead the country forward, who can stand up and be accountable and be able to lead this country forward. You're right that it was not a campaign speech. He clearly had his eye on the history books, but he did nod to the person who he has now endorsed to take the top of the ticket, and that is his vice president, Kamala Harris, saying that he wants to thank her. She's experienced, she's tough, she's capable, that she's been an incredible partner to him and will be a great leader for the country moving forward. There will likely be time, Savannah, and President Biden has alluded to this, for him to get out on the campaign trail and make the case more forcefully for a Harris presidency. That was not this moment, but it was still a nod to that. I will tell you that in my conversations with Democrats over the course of the last couple of days here, there is a moment where I think Democrats want to give President Biden the space and the time to have this moment. They are grateful to him, by and large, for what he has done for the country, and frankly, grateful that he has made this decision in most corners to step off the ticket here. And I've heard a lot over the last couple of days about what Democrats see as the energy and the enthusiasm turning now to Vice President Harris. And you look at it by the numbers, for example, she has raised, her campaign says, a staggering $120+ million in just a few days since President Biden dropped off the ticket and endorsed her. You look at voter registration. Vote.org says nearly 40,000 people in just those first 2 days since the president dropped off came and registered to vote. I've been hearing about that from Democratic leaders in Congress and beyond, that they feel like this is a moment for enthusiasm for the Democratic Party. The question is, of course, does that translate into votes come November? But for this moment, for President Biden, it was not about that full-throated call for his successor. He did acknowledge passing the torch. He did acknowledge, of course, saying that it is time for a younger voice. He said, yes, it is time for that sort of new voice and, yes, a younger voice. But for him, this was about, on his terms, laying out how he sees his legacy moving forward, Savannah and Lester.
And Peter, we understand at the White House there was going to be a viewing moment, or at least staffers could gather to watch this speech. There's no getting around that this is a lame duck presidency now. Do you feel it? Are you feeling it at the White House?
Well, Karine Jean-Pierre, the press secretary, today disputed that it's a lame duck presidency, but to be clear, it's going to be very difficult over the course of these next 6 months to get anything done in terms of legislative accomplishments, facing a recalcitrant Senate Republican, group of Senate Republicans right now. I will tell you, pulling back the curtain a bit tonight, that I am told on the second floor of the White House residence, what's called the state floor, that hundreds of White House staffers and members of the vice president's staff as well have gathered together tonight. They were watching on big screens with pizza brought in, the military band playing as well, described to me as a joyful gathering, but also a bittersweet one, where they were sharing hugs and memories. The first opportunity for many of these staffers to sort of see each other and gather together face to face since the president made this formal announcement. A couple things I'm struck by in this is this in many ways was a farewell speech for the president, but it's only the first of several to come. He will speak again on this issue more broadly with the DNC, the Democratic National Convention, to take place in Chicago. Our reporting is that he is already retooling his message for that address to focus more heavily on Kamala Harris. And of course, he will deliver another more formal farewell address in the closing days of his time in office. And what is striking, though, even as the focus tonight is on President Biden, the focus quickly turns to the vice president and who she may select as her vice president as well. We have listed some of the Democratic governors she's looking at: Josh Shapiro of Pennsylvania, Roy Cooper of North Carolina, Andy Beshear of Kentucky. And multiple sources familiar with the process tonight tell NBC News that among the top priorities for Harris in selecting that person to share the ticket with her is trying to find someone who appeals to those individuals that were brought to the table by President Biden himself, particularly older white voters and suburban women, among the things we'll be watching over the course of the several weeks ahead.
All right, Peter Alexander, thank you.
When the president ending his speech with a personal note saying he hopes the American people know how grateful he is. He talked about being a kid with a stutter from Scranton, Pennsylvania, who reached the heights of political office here in this country, and only in America, he says, would that be possible. That concludes this NBC News special report. We'll have more throughout the night on our streaming channel, NBC News Now, and of course, tomorrow morning on Today. I'm Savannah Guthrie.
And I'm Lester Holt. For all of us here at NBC News, thank you for watching, and good night.